Okay, before we start, I want to just make one announcement. Welcome everybody tuning in on Facebook Live. Please take a minute and share this broadcast on your page with your friends. Tag your friends in the comment sections below. Let's get a lot more people watching and in on this together. And without any further ado, as soon as it settles down up in front here, I'm going to hand the mic over to Coco Das, a writer and one of the members of the National Editorial Board of Refuse Fascism, to start us off.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I really want to welcome everyone who's here in the room today with us and everyone tuning in on Facebook Live. It's really important that you're here. I want to welcome you to Refuse Fascism's mass meeting to consider and plan sustained nonviolent protests beginning this October. This is the truth. We must take to the streets in nonviolent protest week after week, becoming day after day, not stopping until this demand is met. The Trump-Pence regime must go now. The world as we know it has been torn asunder. Concentration camps are torturing immigrants. The earth melts and burns. The danger of war with Iran, even nuclear war, is escalating. There are white supremacists in the White House, and fascist mobs are being unleashed. Truth and science are erased. The right to abortion is nearly gone. And democratic and civil rights are being stripped away. This is fascism unfolding. And there is a great need now to get out of our comfort zones, to come together from many different perspectives, and not allow our differences to stand in the way of a single unifying demand. The Trump-Pence regime must go now. Millions of people wish this was so. They wish they could wake up and this nightmare would be over. But this will not happen by wishing and hoping. It will take tremendous struggle. But when the dam breaks and masses of people are willing to take to the streets and stay in the streets, we have been shown over and over again how quickly the political landscape is dramatically transformed. And the people get to set the terms, not the ruling regime. In Egypt, it took 18 days of protests to force Mubarak out. In South Korea, it was 5 months from the start of protests to parks removal. In Puerto Rico, 15 days. Compare that to the massive gamble of waiting for the 2020 elections. No people have more responsibility to remove their dangerous leaders from power through sustained nonviolent mass protests than the people of this country. There is not a more dangerous regime to the future of humanity and the planet than the Trump-Pence regime in the most powerful country in the world with their fingers on the nuclear trigger. Trump's Make America Great Again is a 21st century fascist manifest destiny. America first, wrapped in the flag and Mike Pence's Bible taken literally, with a program of white supremacy, misogyny, and xenophobia. To not act now to stop this program, in the only way it can be stopped, with the political crisis caused by unrelenting mass protest, is complicity. You are here and you're tuning in live because you are answering the call of history to take on this great challenge and be part of the great conversation and to forge this necessary path to launching these sustained protests. We are stepping into something together that is not easy. The stakes are high. We want there to be vigorous debate. Everyone here should put their minds fully into this, fighting for what you think is right, while you listen to others. And with that, I want to share a very important guiding principle for our movement. Unite all who can be united. Defeat, divide, and conquer. Don't allow the ruling forces or any other forces to divide us or pit us against each other. Don't fall for divide and conquer schemes and divisive actions. Reject and rise above petty disputes and sectarian squabbles. reach out broadly to unite all who can be united from different perspectives and viewpoints around the great unifying objective of driving out through massive sustained political mobilization this regime which has already done great harm and which poses a grave threat to humanity. Abiding by this principle is crucial to bringing out the millions needed to stop this. There are powerful forces who do not want us to succeed. Fascists will threaten, intimidate, lie, and use what Trump called his police, his military, and quote-unquote bikers for Trump to suppress these protests. And at the same time, there are other forces, some who are actively collaborating and conciliating with fascists, who will try other means to keep the resistance within acceptable parameters. And they will also try to divide us. People who should know better will forget Pastor Niemöller's poem and quote from Nazi Germany. First they came for the communists and I did not speak up because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, then they came for the Jews, and by the time people came for me, there was no one left to speak up. We have to learn how to lead people and not falling for these divide and conquer tactics. So today, let's speak up and learn from each other and remember why we are here. Let's imagine what it would mean for humanity if we launched these protests in October. Imagine the hope it would give to millions of people when we fill the streets to say, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. This nightmare must end. The Trump-Pence regime must go now. So with that, I want to hand the mic over to Andy Z. He's the spokesperson for Revolution Books in New York and Berkeley, and the co-initiator and leader of Refuse Fascism.
All right, thank you, Coco. I just want to recommend to all of you that you go to the website refusefascism.org and read the pieces that Coco has written on our website, as well as other members of the editorial board. It's an incredible website with a lot of information that you need to deal with this regime and to understand it and how we're going to fight it. So here's what the rest of the program is going to be. We have had some discussion as we began organizing for these meetings, and given what people came up against, I am going to give a rather substantive, which could be translated as to say lengthy, talk that gets into a lot of what we've learned so far. I don't know how long it is. It's probably about 45 minutes. And then after that, we're going to, maybe we'll have a short break, and we're going to, Sansara Taylor, who is also a co-initiator of Refuse Fascism, is going to open up the discussion on not just what I said, but also on the proposed plan. And we're going to have some discussion of that. And then comes the question of, well, how are we going to do this? Which will be begun in the previous section. So that's the plan for the next 3 hours. And what we're setting out to do is substantial, so it's going to take a little bit of time. And we could, obviously, when we were contemplating this, realized we could spend the day on it, even 2 days. But we're going to start here. Okay, so let me get to what I'm going to do and hopefully set some context and answer some questions and provoke many more. The Trump-Pence regime must go. We are setting out over the next weeks and months to change the course of history. Our objective is nothing less than to set in motion a process through which the Trump-Pence fascist regime, a regime which now rules the most powerful country on earth, with all the devastating consequences that holds for humanity, is removed from power by our unleashing a different power, the power of the people. You, who are gathered here today, together with the people who are watching online, and those who come to similar meetings across the country over the next 10 days, are going to decide that starting in late October, that is the time to act in the only way that could stop this fascist regime. And we will plan, because it's on each and all of us to struggle to bring forward the potential power of a people who stand up and are unrelenting in their demand. We're going to call forth the power of the people acting in their masses, gathering at first hundreds and thousands in cities across the country, declaring and making manifest that we will not stop until our demand is met. The whole Trump-Pence regime must go now. Those of us who are here today, and those who stepped forward when we launched the struggle in late October, must do so in a way that challenges more people to come out the next week, and even more the week after. Growing so that thousands? Okay, bear with us.
Battery.
Uh-oh. What kind of battery?
It's a AA battery.
All right. Now, there's a live stream. What happened to the live
I
stream?
need to
It's right here.
persevere
Okay.
out loud, very loud, as they try to fix this. I'll bring one down from downstairs.
Okay. Well, to those watching at home, all right.
The power of the
walk-
people is going to be greater than the man's technology on this. Go for it.
So can we find out, is the sound sufficient without, in
For
terms of the
live
broadcast?
stream, can somebody test it on the live stream? Can somebody listen?
Ask the people that are watching.
People watching, will you give us a comment? Can you hear this okay at home? We're going to keep going if you can. We're probably going to keep going either way, but we really want you to hear us.
Someone said we can still hear you.
said
Okay.
use the wired mic. Move it over.
No, it's not connected.
They said we
It's
can.
just return.
A few
Go
people
ahead.
said they can still hear.
All right.
All right. So since Sarah Taylor is correct, we're going on people power. You can let's just check the. All right. So the last row of the balcony says they can hear this.
Okay, it comes through.
Okay. So those of us who are here today, and those who stepped forward when we launched the struggle in late October, must do so in a way that challenges more people to come out the next week after we start, and then the week after, growing so that thousands quickly grow within a few weeks to tens and hundreds of thousands, and then ultimately to millions acting together in nonviolent protest until our demand is met. A movement that begins with mass protest week after week, such as is going on now in Hong Kong, becomes protest that develops into a day after day and night after night persistent and insistent movement. A movement that by its growing mass of people and by the momentum it gathers creates a political crisis for the rulers of this country. A situation that reverberates around the world, a political crisis of such scale that it cannot be ignored or repressed without further unraveling the standing and legitimacy of the whole power structure here and around the world, drawing even more people into the streets. And this could compel a significant section of those in power to finally act to remove this regime. And that, combined with an even more intensified effort from us, the people, could actually win. Be clear. The powers that be do not lack for reason or evidence to impeach and remove Trump. Those in power, concentrated in the Democratic Party, who are themselves targets of this regime, are nonetheless more beholden to and are representatives of the system that has given rise to Donald Trump than to humanity here and around the world. They will not act, nor will they mobilize you to act to stop the regime, except to corral you, to domesticate your righteous outrage into the elections and voting for them in 2020, unless and until they are faced with confronting what we are considering today. We are planning for and working towards launching the next month a different kind of nonviolent, sustained protest movement. A movement which uncorks the now suppressed feelings of millions against this regime, tapping into the outrage at this vile, bullying, white supremacist, misogynist, anti-immigrant, warmongering, anti-LGBTQ fascist regime that is hell-bent on letting the planet burn. These Democratic office holders and their mouthpieces in the mainstream media don't want to see the masses of us in the streets, giving voice and body and soul to our aspirations and acting with conviction and determination to achieve them. In that situation, these masses could get out of control of the Democratic Party leadership and the system they represent and enforce. We must say to people, we have to say to people, the Democratic Party has told you and shown you that they want your energies focused on getting them elected. And we have to pose to people, where has that gotten us? Right to where we are, to a fascist regime in power. Did even one candidate use the F word? Nancy Pelosi has over and over again said she won't impeach. She said they have all said they won't do this because it would divide the country. It already is divided. The problem is, one side is fighting to bring fascism, and the Democratic Party are as afraid of the people they claim to speak for as they are of the Trump-Pence regime. The question is, where do we stand, and what are we going to do? Now is the time to shed illusions, to stop leaving the driving to others. There is no road of painless progress when confronting fascism. So come on now, let's go. The demand, the Trump-Pence regime must go now, is simple, direct, and it invites the broadest unity. It expresses the actual interests of people of the world, and it concentrates the deeply felt desires of millions of people of diverse backgrounds and beliefs living in this country, those who are living in dread and anger at what the Trump-Pence regime is doing. Yes, right now, most of these people are going along with great crimes, such that it often feels like we are living through the night of the living dead. But we are here to wake people the fuck up. And to do so by taking the responsibility to struggle with everything we've got, to move masses of people out of their stupor and into the streets. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept and we refuse to live in a fascist America. We need to shake people from avoiding what's happening, living with their heads buried in the mirror of their iPhones as the world careens into the horror of fascist regimes. But look at the students around the world striking to save the planet. Look at the faces from Puerto Rico and to Hong Kong, and you see something different. Joyous, determined people, inspired to act with conscience. Then, dread can give way to hope. The fruitless fretting over my life can transform into the exhilaration and sense of purpose that comes when we stand up and fighting together with others for the future. The we must grow as we sharply struggle with one and all about what we face and what we need to do, making the case to stop being complicit and to join in what is surely one of the great challenges of recent history to drive this fascist regime from power. This can be done. Tunisia, Egypt, South Korea, Puerto Rico, and right now Hong Kong. All over the world, people demand of their presidents and governors, get out now. They refuse to wait for more promises to be betrayed. They lost patience with stacked courts and talk shop, do-nothing legislatures. They felt that to wait for elections that are too far off and are rigged was intolerable. And when there are setbacks, they gather again and stand up. Did you know that just this past weekend, thousands have taken to the streets in Egypt again? And in the city of Alexandria, they were chanting, "Rise up, fear not, Sisi must go." While the struggle in this country will not be exactly the same, it is a more complex place. There is the simple: get in the streets and stay. And there is inspiration as well as rich, positive, and negative lessons to learn and to heed from these other countries. But all too many of even those who post memes of the mass protests from afar with headlines that say, "Let's Puerto Rico this," but then they back away, making the excuse that it can't be done here. That this hasn't been done thus far is not proof that it can't be. The very extremeness of what we face, its deep roots in the history and the currently lived experience of millions of people in this country, provides the basis to call forth people to do what they haven't done before. If we create a situation where these masses of people are compelled to really confront the reality of a fascist America, and if we provide a way forward, a way that will not be easy, not without sacrifice, but where the difficulty and sacrifice pale beside both the horrors that will come if we do nothing and the liberating potential to advance every struggle for justice as we succeed. The abolitionist Frederick Douglass said that if there is no struggle, there is no progress. You want the rain, but not the thunder and lightning. So let's again get into this. I want to get into this fascism. It's a word we use a lot, but what is it and how is it taking shape? We face a fascist regime. They are bringing fascism. Those who say it can't happen here are wrong. It is. And those who say, well, it's sort of fascism, but then find a reason to say it's not yet fascism, are making excuses and finding reason to back away from and to not do what needs to be done. So we need to get into this because people act on what they understand is necessary. We face an extraordinary situation. A regime in a Republican Party that is fascist and hell-bent on consolidating a qualitatively more draconian, more brutal form of rule over this country, with grave impact on the whole world. Indeed, the survival of humanity hangs in the balance as this regime denies science, ridicules climate change, and has torn up every environmental protection they can. But wasn't it a beautiful outpouring of students this past Friday determined to save the planet? And they've just begun. They see the stakes for their future, and they are organizing and getting to work because they recognize this existential crisis for humanity. We have to go out among these youth and unite with their warnings, their aspirations, and their determination. We need to pose the problem to them that there is no more dire threat to the planet at this moment than the continuation of this fascist regime in power and the threat that it will actually consolidate a fully fascist form of rule and what that scientific reality will mean for the future of the planet. The students have shown a determination to face facts and get others to do so. And this spirit and approach needs to be brought into the battle to drive out the Trump-Pence regime. Many of them know that the U.S. is the largest contributor to global warming and that it would take 5 Earths to support the lifestyle of this country. And that this regime is not only on overdrive to accelerate global warming, but when faced with hundreds of thousands of immigrants, of migrants, of refugees fleeing countries devastated in part by climate change today, a number that will only grow to be millions and even hundreds of millions worldwide, it meets them with walls, concentration camps, and worse, while it doubles down on accelerating carbon emissions. And we must speak the truth to these young people. To not get their struggle roped into working to elect the Democrats as the answer to this. The Democrats not only just funded $4.5 billion for border security, but their proposals for the environment, including the Green New Deal, are all situated in preserving the power of the U.S. empire. And it perpetuates the lie that everyone here can have all their goodies and still save the planet. Speaking for myself as a revolutionary and an advocate of the new communism that's been developed by the leader of the revolution, Bob Avakian, Look, you cannot save the planet and develop an ecologically sustainable society under the capitalist imperialist system. That requires a real revolution, and that is what I work for. For those of us striving to emancipate humanity, driving out the Trump-Pence regime is a crucial part now of organizing people for the future time when we can make a real revolution and actually win. Similarly, for every person and group working for social justice in this country, taking up this fight to drive out the Trump-Pence regime is the most crucial need now. That is why we can and why we must unite all who can be united in this great cause. But saving the planet is not the only question that threatens the fate of humanity. Right now, we are balanced on the hair trigger of whether or not the Trump-Pence regime will unleash a war against Iran. And do not underestimate the conflagration that could ensue from that. Trump has said that if we have nuclear weapons, why can't we use them? And a year ago, that Dark Ages Christian fascist Mike Pence gave a speech threatening China that extolled Trump's beefing up of the most powerful military in history and highlighting Trump's modernizing of the U.S. nuclear arsenal. Mike Pence ended his speech invoking a Chinese proverb that concludes with, "Heaven sees the future." He delivered this in a way that was straight up gangsta. He delivered deadpan with menace, asserting America's right to dominate and threaten the world while cloaked in the garb of fulfilling a mission from God. Refuse Fascism's call to act sharply puts it this way: Trump's Make America Great Again is a 21st century program of manifest destiny. America first, wrapped in the flag, and Mike Pence's Bible taken literally, with a program of white supremacy, misogyny, and xenophobia. Babavikian has said, quote, "American lives are not more important than other people's lives." When it is U.S. bombs and satellites guiding the death and devastation of the country of Yemen by Saudi Arabia, resulting in mass starvation and an epidemic of cholera, and you avert your eyes, you blind yourself and find yourself complicit. Powerful forces in the ruling class of this country got behind Trump and Pence because they determined that the ruling norms and the social compact since World War II were no longer tenable for the future of America, domestically and for its domination of the world. They see that the only way to cohere the country is as a white fundamentalist Christian patriarchal society, that the liberalization, reforms won since the 1960s, would destroy that reactionary cohesion that they desire. And they believe that the international alliances that has maintained their system since World War II were undermining the U.S. position as top dog in the world, thus their current shredding of agreements and treaties. There is a very important discussion in the talk by Babavikian, The Trump-Pence Regime Must Go, which is a film which we hopefully will show a clip from later on, where he argues that the belief that America is a force for good in the world, that we are the good guys, and the whole mindset and distortion of reality that this concentrates is one of the main things that demobilizes people standing up against this regime as well as the system as a whole. He goes into this in a sharp and humorous way that I won't spoil for you here, so you can check out the film on revcom.us and on refusefascism.org. There exists a whole web of global economic relations that feeds the American way of life. The ability to consume, consume, consume. The clothes we wear, the food we eat, the precious metals in our cell phones, all these are the end result of ruthless global and economic political relations of brutal exploitation of people and millions of children around the world. And it's enforced at the point of a gun by the 600 plus military bases that the U.S. has around the world. This belief that anything the U.S. does is justified because we're the good guys, and the lifestyle that undergirds this myth is a major source of the political passivity and, frankly, complicity with great crimes. Refuse Fascism and the movement to drive out the regime includes not only those like myself who share this systematic critique of capitalism, imperialism, and the role of the U.S. in the world, and that revolution is the road to emancipate all of humanity. But refuse fascism includes and must bring into the, but refuse fascism includes and must bring into the struggle many more people who believe that America is or could be a force for good in the world. And coming from these different perspectives, we all unite and recognize that the Trump-Pence fascist America is a danger to humanity. So as we come together from different points of view on the nature of the system we live under, it does matter for everyone to strive to look at the world and the role of this country critically, to be willing to look at the facts about this history, and to come to recognize that an unquestioning belief that whatever America does in the world is by definition good because we are good, a viewpoint that is relentlessly hammered into place by movies and TV, as well as the news and the politicians, will deliver you right into supporting Trump or being cowed into silence when Trump asserts that America and its warriors are in harm's way. And to be sure, the Democratic Party leadership will be right there with him, pledging allegiance and even taking the position to the right of him, arguing that they would do better and be stronger. The fascism of Trump-Pence is not just America first in relation to the rest of the world, but at its programmatic core is a triad of white supremacy, misogyny, and xenophobia, which is the hatred and fear of people from other countries, which spew from the Twitter finger of that and the loud mouth of Mr. Mein Trump, calling the KKK and Nazis very fine people. He's a fascist pig who brags of grabbing women by their genitals, slandering refugees and asylum seekers from countries devastated by the U.S. as rapists and murderers. Vicious lies that incited mass murder in El Paso, in California, in Pittsburgh, shattering political norms and throwing away the dog whistle of racism. He glories and gloats and rallies, throwing out racist tropes like telling the squad of congresswomen of color to go back where they came from, thrilling his rabid racist mob that is his base, who shriek back, "Throw them out, throw them out." He called Baltimore, a largely black city, a disgusting rat and rodent infested place. This rhetoric of fascist demonization rallies and hardens a rabid fascist base, fueling and legitimizing a killing program. Concentration camps with tens of thousands of refugees on the border right now as we sit here. Children continue to be separated from their parents. And let's look at this. Immigrant children separated from their parents is a crucial object lesson for why only what we are calling for, sustained mass struggle aimed at the removal of the whole regime, can stop this. Let's look at it. Millions were outraged when the child separation first came to light. People protested. Civil liberties lawyers filed lawsuits in court. And then the protests died down. And the case was at first won in the courts, but the regime ignored the courts, creating new facts on the ground, and the longer the regime goes on, the more they will be able to pack the courts with fascists who will support them. Look also at the travel ban on Muslims. This too was righteously protested. And at first, it too was blocked by the courts. But the Trump-Pence regime kept going back into court until on the third try, they got a very slightly modified plan approved. And now that ban is legal. Now this is important. Fascism comes by degrees, not all at once, but it does advance, and that is happening here. And it can come to pass where the avenues of redress are no more. The Führer's words become fact and law, even as they should be neither. The Trump-Pence fascist regime has made some of their most dangerous and potentially enduring gains in stacking the courts with fascist judges. A core part of this fascist regime is the alliance with an extensive Christian fascist movement, decades in the making, that sees in Trump, with Mike Pence and the Christian fascist movement locked to Trump's side, they see in Trump a leader who will break all the rules to get their program written into law. The right of women to be full human beings, to control their own destinies, is on the verge of being wiped out as the right to abortion hangs by a mere thread. So do not say that fascism can't happen here. Bob Avakian has said, quote, "There is a direct line from the Confederacy to the fascists of today, and there is a direct connection between their white supremacy, their open disgust and hatred for LGBTQ people, as well as women, their willful rejection of science and the scientific method, their raw American first jingoism and trumpeting of the superiority of Western civilization, and their bellicose wielding of military power, including their express willingness and blatant threats to use nuclear weapons to destroy countries," end quote. The Refuse Fascism call to act cuts to the heart of what this fascism is. Fascism rules by organized repression and terror by the government. Civil liberties are stripped away, law rewritten, dissent criminalized, the courts packed with fascists, and the separation of powers in the church and state ultimately eviscerated. As part of radically remaking society, the Trump-Pence regime must sharply attack those in positions of power who oppose them. And fascism also mobilizes mobs of vicious thugs, as we've seen with Nazis marching and murdering in Charlottesville, Virginia. I and we could take the whole afternoon to illustrate this position. But here, I'm just going to add one more example. Let's take a look at Trump's insistence that Hurricane Dorian was going to hit Alabama with his magic marker scrawl on a weather map to illustrate his point, which then the Birmingham, Alabama Weather Bureau corrected so as not to risk panic among the people and the unnecessary diversion of precious rescue resources. While the Democrats and liberal pundits trivialized this by joking about it for days, distracting people with Trump's buffoonery, Trump doubled down, defending his assertion and ordering from the cabinet level the governing agency to reprimand the Birmingham Weather Bureau, threatening reprisals and eliciting essentially an apology. This matters. Why? For one, lives are at stake. Preparation, evacuation, and rescue depend on accurate, objective data. And two, and critical for understanding fascism, the denial of truth and objective evidence are always essential to fascism's advance. But this incident is far from an aberration. Going after truth, proffering lies, and shredding what is supposed to be a basic civil liberty and governing norm where there is a media free from direct order and control by the state, Trump consistently attacks the press, branding them as what? An enemy of the people, and even traitors. The relentless attack on what is true, on objective reality, on science is a key and dangerous component of fascism. This approach forges a base of people who will believe and follow the truth of the fascist leader, whatever he says and without question. And as truth is eroded and everything becomes seen as just an opinion, and what you believe is determined by who is saying it and what you already want to believe. Once that notion of objective truth is erased from society and even outlawed, because after all, what is the logical conclusion of what happens to people who are branded as enemies of the people, enemies of the state, and traitors? Then the people cannot be free to change the world. For to change the world, to overcome all the divisions and the forms of oppression that are the world today, it requires knowing the world as it actually is. And here it must be said that identity politics and its standpoint epistemology, which is the notion that truth is determined by who is saying it, by their direct lived experience as a member of a social group, and that truth varies from person to person? Does it need to be said that this parallels and leaves the door wide open to the Trumpian epistemology? Yeah, I think not. We say this is fascism, not as insult or to be better than everybody else who are opposed to the regime, but because that is what an objective evaluation shows. Too many, even some of those who write books warning of fascism, prefer to say it's authoritarian, it's proto-fascist, it's neo-fascist. Anything but squarely confront that the Trump-Pence fascist regime is fascist. Yes, it has not as yet consolidated a full-out fascist form of rule. If it had already done so, it would be immeasurably more difficult to do what we are planning for. We probably wouldn't have put posters all around town saying we're holding this meeting. But history shows that it can become too late to stop it without tremendous cost. And yes, it is an American fascism. It's not brown shirts and big boots. It is an American fascism, reasserting and recreating the founding myth of this country as a shining city on the hill, a mythology wrapped in the flag and the Bible taken literally, white supremacy with the male at the head of the traditional family, with the nation blessed with the divine right to rule over everything. Robert Paxton writes in his book, The Anatomy of Fascism, quote, "The language and symbols of an authentic American fascism would have to be as familiar and reassuring to loyal Americans as the language and symbols of the original fascisms were familiar and reassuring to many Italians and Germans," end quote. Here, too, is why the Democratic Party and its leadership and their mouthpieces in the mainstream media have no answer but mumbles. CNN or MSNBC prattle on and on about how he can't do that. Trump can't do that. That's not normal. That's not presidential. That's not how it's done. When that is precisely the point. Trump and Pence are breaking the norms to bring about a different form of rule to this country, which they and the forces behind them see as the way to save their vision of America and its capital's imperialist foundation. But because the Democratic Party is also a ruling party of this system and aspires to be fully in charge again, they will not fundamentally do anything that undermines their system. They are not and they cannot bring the change that most of their base, that most of you need and want. This is why AOC and her thrilled social democratic and progressive supporters will learn that, quote, "If you try to make the Democrats what they are not and will never be, you will end up being more like what the Democrats actually are." And that's a quote from BA's Basics. So I'm going to conclude this discussion of fascism with this, also from Bob Avakian, who has been identifying and analyzing and putting forward how to deal with the development of fascism in the United States for over the last 3 decades. And in a speech in October 2017, he said, "The truth, another terrible truth that must be faced, is that in the context of profound and acute contradictions that are asserting or reasserting themselves in ways that are tearing at the very fabric and deepening cracks in the foundation of this country, at the same time as the American empire is facing serious challenges internationally, fascism is one possible resolution of this, on the terms of this system and its ruling class, even as that is a horror for humanity." And he went on to forcefully argue that the way to stop this can only come through the actions of masses of people acting outside the normal channels, and to do so in our own interests, which are the interests of humanity. And here is what is one of the most important insights of the Refuse Fascism call to action. Quote, "We must confront the reality that the world as we have known it is being torn asunder. And this requires getting out of our comfort zones and not allowing our differences to stand in the way of rising together in an unprecedented and unrelenting mass struggle to confront the danger of the Trump-Pence fascist America. And in calling for these meetings, we have posed the following questions, which underscore the situation we face and what must be done. If you will not take to the streets now, what will you do if Trump wins? What will you do if he loses but refuses to take office? To leave office.
Thank you.
Thank you. This fall, before the primaries and the 2020 election goes into full throttle, is when what we are calling for is most possible, and it is certainly necessary. I'm going to come to a conclusion of this talk by discussing some of what we have already run into and what we will run into. A prominent activist wrote to me and he said, calling for protests is the easy part, but the hard part is enabling people to participate and feel that if they sacrifice and take risks, we might win and it would be worth it. And then this person stepped away himself from participating, or at least for now. Part of their reason is that we have to respect the struggles that people are involved in right now, as if, and with no evidence, that we don't do that. And not say that this program, and that we should not say that this program of removing the Trump-Pence regime is the only thing that can stop this regime. Well, what else will do that?
That's right.
Many fighters for social justice will say, and have said, we are just overwhelmed with what's already on our plate. Well, we get that, but yet we ask, what will come of every struggle for social justice when fascism is consolidated, when dissent is for all practical purposes outlawed? We have pointed out before, and this is important, that fascism can absorb separate acts of resistance against different fronts of their attacks. They will pull back and throw the opposition off balance, moving their agenda forward now here and now there. This is important. Fascism can absorb separate acts of resistance against different fronts of their attacks. They will pull back and throw opposition off balance, moving their agenda forward now here, now there, while the whole thing marches ahead. Have we not seen this happen already? So the meetings that we are holding over the next 10 days are an invitation to one and to all to contribute your creativity, your thinking, and your energy. And that invitation does not stop when we launch this. It just begins. And then it needs to be replicated thousands and thousands of times over by people who we haven't yet met. For to be able to drive out this regime, it cannot be protest as usual. You know the drill. Assemble. Speeches. March. Speeches. Go home. No. That is not going to cut it. What we are calling for is what you see now in Hong Kong. It's portrayed in the movie The Square about Egypt. It was the students and youth who took to the streets last Friday and who will be on the streets next week. That's the image. Look at those aerial photos. That's what it's going to take, not just in one city, but in every city, and not stopping until our demand is met. People have also raised to us, as a matter of morality, that if I think this plan might not work, I am not responsible to undertake it. Really? Never, ever has any serious social change come with a guarantee. And if one is offered, it likely is not, let me just say, it cannot be a real solution. What is really immoral and irresponsible is not to try. History will not judge us harshly if we try with all we've got to stop fascism and to save the planet and humanity, and we don't succeed. But we do, and we should, judge those who did not stand up in fascist Germany when there was still time, and in other countries when they could and but chose instead to not resist. We will not escape that judgment should we fail to act. Coco read the poem of Martin Niemöller that captures the horrors that happen when just looking out for and saving yourself because you are not directly affected, where that leads. And in the same vein, people have raised, Refuse Fascism tried this before, but you didn't succeed. So what will be different this time? For one, people have now experienced almost 3 years of this. And while many have accommodated to this regime, they have also seen what it has wrought and what it can bring. The murder of Heather Heyer by fascists in Charlottesville in the summer of 2017 has been followed by several horrific mass murders of Jews, of Latino immigrants in different states and around the country. And two, people have been through and tried the blue wave, the Mueller investigation. They've waited. They've waited on the courts. They've had hopes raised and dashed over and over. And three, Refuse Fascism has learned some things. It's been raised that if we do this, then maybe Trump will declare martial law. And we shouldn't provoke the beast. Let's ride it out. The writer George Prochnik, in his biography of Stefan Zweig, who was one of the most famous authors in Europe in the 1930s, wrote this, quote, "The excruciating power of Zweig's memoir lies in the pain of looking back and seeing that there was a small window in which it was possible to act, and then discovering how suddenly and irrevocably that window can be slammed shut," end quote. But what about fear? It's been said that the greater fear should be that people will not act to stop this unfolding horror. I share that many nights. I've spoken already about the allure, illusion, and delusion of painless progress, of relying on the elections to stop what they cannot and will not. People will raise to you concern about their job, their family, and even repulsively about not tarnishing their brand. Well, first off, fuck your brand. But yes, this regime is serious. They have said repeatedly that they see in Trump their last and best chance to bring about a fascist agenda, and that they have worked on this for decades. They have said, as Trump has said, many tough people on their side. They have been open about and warning of and wanting a civil war rather than give up their agenda. The matter is, and the questions are, do you want to live in their white supremacist, misogynist, Christian fascist world? Do you want to inflict that on the billions of people who the U.S. demonizes and dominates? Do you want to live in a gated world where huge sections of humanity are locked out and left to drown or starve or live indefinitely in camps? No. Then the question of the hour is, are you going to act now when there is a chance to do something about it?
Yes.
The way to break fear is to act together for what's right. That's what we are setting out to do. Now, there is a tremendous liberating potential, a tremendous liberating positive in what we envision. We're going to struggle to bring forward the masses of people we need to really get this momentum going. We are proposing not just 1 week, but committing from the very beginning, starting when we decide to do this over the next 10 days, for people to commit to 4 weeks where the protest grows week after week, getting us in a position where we can go even further from that, doing everything we can to challenge and inspire masses of people to join us, just to do that, between now and when we start, will require bold action and really raucous debate, which must be principled, but it has to be hard fought. So I want to close with asking you again to recall the faces, the songs, the determination of the people who have stood up in other countries. And think about what it would mean for people of this country to act in their millions to say, in the name of humanity, we refuse to live in a fascist America. Think about what we saw in those students last week. And to those of you old enough to have lived through the 1960s, recall what is possible when people act together and begin to throw off the chains of all the oppressive relations and thinking that keeps us caged in petty competitive bullshit of this society. To be working with people like you and many not like you, striving together to drive out a horrific fascist regime as we defy convention and endure good and bad weather, creating a situation where not only can the nightmare of the Trump-Pence regime be over, but we create a movement where dreams can soar, another world becomes possible, creativity is unleashed, and the impossible becomes possible. Thank you.
Okay, so that was Andy Z. Let's hear it one more time. I'm going to say a few things before we take a break because I want to share them with the live stream on Facebook. And then we will turn off the live stream and we will take a break and then we're going to come back and organize together. But we just got a lot and we need a lot of substance. We need a lot of foundation and grounding. What we are doing is truly historic, what we are undertaking. And we're going to go through this together. So I just want to say a few things for everybody in the room and everybody on the live stream before we take a break and then we come back together and we start organizing, we start wrestling with this. We get to work to dig into what we heard and to dig into making the plans to realize it. The first thing I want to say is, everybody who walked in the room, oh, by the way, my name is Sansari Taylor. I'm also a writer for RevCon.us, and I'm a co-initiator with Andy and others of the RefuseFascism.org movement, and I'm part of the National Get Organized for an Actual Revolution tour. So, hi. But I wanted to let you know, when you came in the room, you got a packet, I believe, and one of the things maybe somebody could hand me is a sign-up sheet. It's a really important form. We want to make sure during the break everybody fills it out. It's a way that we're going to stay connected with each other. And if you're watching on the live stream, hey, thank you so much. If you're watching on the live stream, we have the form, a link to the form in the description of this Facebook Live. So you can click the link, you can go to refusefascism.org and fill out the exact same form we have in the room here. So you can get connected to be an organizer in your city, to come to a mass meeting in your area, to be part of fundraising, to be part of all kinds of ways of getting involved in this. I want to let you know that. Number two, I want to say that in the room here today, we have people from Atlanta. Let me hear you, or hear it for them. We have people from Philly. We have people from Cleveland, from New York City, from here in D.C. and Maryland. We have people from New York. This is a national movement. If there's people here, Detroit, Texas. Oh yeah, of course, Texas, right? Florida. All right. Rhode Island. Dayton, Ohio. This is really important.
From Cleveland.
Cleveland. Shout out to Cleveland. Here we go.
Nebraska.
So, and watching around
Nebraska
the country.
too.
Where?
Nebraska too.
Nebraska. All right. Very good. Virginia. All right. So listen, I'm saying this, I'm taking a minute to announce this because we actually need a movement across this country. There are millions and tens of millions. And we have to rouse people in every corner of this society. And if you are in this room, it's really important. We're sending people back around the country. And wherever you're watching from, this is the first in a series of meetings that were taking place over the course of 10 days. We are launching here in the nation's capital this organizing and strategizing because this is the seat of power. This is where the fascism is emanating from. But we have to organize this nationwide. So around the country, if you're in Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or Cleveland, Philly, there's a bunch of places. Go to refusefascism.org. There are mass organizing meetings in cities across the country next weekend. We want people to come to those meetings. And if you got to drive 5 hours to get there and bring a bunch of friends, make it a road trip, be in the house in these meetings because we have to have this same organizing go deeper and further. And this is going to be a fight. We're going to get into that today. It's going to be a joyous one, as Andy ended with. But we're going to get into that today. But I want to invite you to that. If you are in a place where there's not a meeting and you can't get to a meeting and you want to host one, write into refusefascism.org. Fill out the form on the page. Let us know. We will help you with resources to host a meeting. So this is the second thing I want to say. Third thing, No movement makes anything serious happen on any scale in this society or any other in this era without funds. We really need, it's one of the most important ways to to support this movement, to spread this movement, to help reach the tens of millions who hate this but don't see a way to stand up and really stop it. So we want to ask you in the House and at home to make a donation. If you want to give on Venmo, it's refuse-fascism, very easy to do, refuse-fascism. You can donate at refusefascism.org with your credit card. If you're in the house here, you can put your money in the basket. I see Scott, thank you very much for passing around a basket. We've got these, you don't see them here because we're going to be projecting video a little bit later up here, but we have posters all over, we have stickers, we're sending organizers around the country, we want to put ads on Facebook, we want to reach people. We need tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. We're going to need ultimately millions of dollars to do what we're talking about doing. I know we're in a church basement right now, and we're starting with a shoestring, but that's how a lot of movements begin. But it's to scale up, we need the funds. Right now, we are in the middle of a fund drive, and we actually raised a significant amount. Shout out to people we met yesterday at the We the People March who came out today. At that march, we raised over $1,000 with the stickers, with donations. It was very important. We have to raise $469 more by tomorrow night to meet our current fundraising goal. So please give generously at home, ask your friends, and then we're going to take this up collectively going forward. So that's thing 3. Thing number 4, I only have 2 more things and then we'll take a little break. I want a little bit later in the program, here in the House in DC, we're going to show what Andy mentioned, a trailer for a film by Bob Avakian called The Trump-Pence Regime Must Go. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. A better world is possible. This film is available at revcom.us. It's available at refusefascism.org. It's an incredible resource. It's an incredible tool for organizing. We should take full advantage of this speech that goes into the depth of the fascism we're facing and the solution to it. I just want to let people know it's there. We'll share a portion of it with the people here a little bit later, as well as a message from one of our editorial board members, Sarah Rourke. We'll show the video. It doesn't translate well on live stream to film video, so we'll show it later. But I wanted to let you know watching. And then I'm going to leave you with a question that we'll discuss when we come back together. And that is, there's 2 questions actually. The first question we're going to dig into together, which I'll repose when we come back, but people can think about it during the break. I think we have to dig into why and how this vision of a movement, like what happened in Puerto Rico or Hong Kong, in this country, these mass, sustained, not march, assemble, speech, go home, but coming back week after week after week and growing and becoming eventually day after day, why and how it is that these kinds of protests with the demand that the regime must go actually do hold the potential to create the kind of political crisis that forces this regime out. Andy laid this out, but we have to dig into this together. Why and how can this succeed? And why is it the case that nothing else can? And I think the more we dig into that and understand that together, the more clarity we're going to have going out. So that's going to be our first discussion we have. And people should raise their questions very frankly. You should put forward things that maybe you've run into. You should put forward ideas you have about why this can succeed. That's our first discussion. And our second discussion is then going to dig into, on that foundation, how do we go out from where we are now, from a series of mass meetings in cities across this country, bringing together dozens, maybe hundreds, maybe 1,000 people across the country, to call forward the kind of mass protests that we envisioned that could actually do this. So first is how the grand strategy of this can work, and second is how do we get to work on this. And we're going to spend the bulk of the rest of our time together digging into this, so I want to, again, thank you for coming out from all over the place. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to stay in touch. Make sure you fill out that form on the refusefascism.org website. We're going to turn off the live stream. We'll take a little break, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes.